Plath and Hughes. Intro. When studying literary texts, deeper meanings and underlying themes are not always immediately apparent. This is especially true in Sylvia Plath's Daddy and Ted Hughes' The Shot. From Plath's love-hate relationship with her father to how her unresolved trauma affected her marriage, studying these poems in conjunction with one another compels us to re-examine their parallel themes of love and loss. It highlights the complexities and intertwined legacies of these two poets and allows us to dive deeper into their nuances and meaning. Body 1. The exploration of love, loss, and identity reveals the complexity of human relationships, highlighting how admiration and resentment can intertwine to create a deep sense of conflict and emotional turmoil. In Daddy, Plath explores themes of love, loss, and identity in her relationship with her father, depicting him as an oppressive and authoritarian figure, combining admiration and obsession with deep-seated resentment, creating a vivid and disturbing image, akin to that of the Nazis and the Jews. The quote, "I made a model of you, a man in black with a Mein Kampf look," compares her father to a Nazi figure with Aryan eye, bright blue, expressing the complex blend of reverence and terror she felt towards him. Plath obsesses over her father's image, making him a model for her future relationships with other men. The color symbolism and juxtaposition between the colors black and bright blue further amplifies her conflicted feelings of love and resentment. Body 2. Ted Hughes' The Shot serves as a reflective account of Plath's life from his perspective, showing how Plath's grief manifested itself in their relationship, revisiting the same themes of love, obsession, trauma, and guilt that pervade her existence. Your worship needed a god, where it lacked one, it found one. Ordinary jocks became gods, deified by your infatuation. Hughes underlines Plath's need for an idol, suggesting that her intense need to get back to her father caused her to look for him in her relationships. This worshipful need becomes a recurring theme, indicating a pattern of seeking powerful male figures to fill the void her father left. This personification of Plath's worship insinuates that it has its own agency in seeking out a new idol. This further emphasizes how Plath's previous loss and grief turned her love into something that was not just personal, but obsessive and almost religious in worship. Body 3. Plath studies her relationship with her father's memory and how loss and grief have affected her over time. The quote, "I was 10 when they buried you, at 20 I tried to die, and get even the bones would do, to you I thought even the bones would do," uses imagery and symbolism of Plath grasping at her father's worldly remains, show her extreme and intense desire to return to him. The contrast between the ages of 10 and 20 shows that her yearning and longing for her father remain strong even with time. There is a bitter irony in her belief that even the bones would do, showing her futility and desperation in her yearning. The repetition of back, back, back re-emphasizes her immense longing and failure to move on. This grief is the driving force and a reoccurring theme in Ted Hughes' The Shot, as it ultimately leads to her suicide attempt as a means to finally reunite with her father. Body 4. Hughes suggests that the death of Plath's father sent her on a bullet-like path of obsession and self-destruction. In the quote, "Your daddy had been aiming you at God when his death touched the trigger," Hughes describes the impact of her father's death as a catalyst that sent her spiraling into a series of tragic events in her life. The extended metaphor and imagery of her father's death touching the trigger suggests that her fate was already sealed and irrevocably altered. There was little Hughes could do to stop it. The reference to God alludes to absolute authority and finality, suggesting that her father's death and the trauma it left behind was so profound it aimed her at an inescapable fate. There is a layer of irony in the suggestion that her father's death inadvertently sent her on a path of self-destruction. While aiming her at God could also mean setting her on a path to salvation, the reality was that it led to further psychological pain and the obsessive search for something that was ultimately unattainable. In conclusion, through an extensive engagement with Sylvia Plath's Daddy and Ted Hughes' Shot, both poets truly explore themes of love, obsession and trauma. Hughes' perspective provides additional context and depth, allowing us to see how Plath's unresolved issues affected not only her poetry but also her relationships and ultimately her fate. Through vivid imagery, metaphor and repetition, both poets explore the emotional and psychological impacts of Plath's relationship with her father and its enduring effects. Studying these texts together offers us a multifaceted exploration of the human psyche and allows us to examine the deeper meanings behind these poems. Emma. It is a truth universally and timelessly acknowledged that young people often have a perception of themselves as possessing far greater knowledge and insight than in actuality. Emma by Jane Austen explores the trope of marriage from the limited, unreliable perspective of its protagonist to represent the youthful foolishness and egotism of a young upper-class privileged woman discovering flaws in her perception of herself and the world. It epitomizes the character of a privileged and naive single woman, under the impression that she is sagely providing marriage advice to an equally naive lower-class young single woman. Austen highlights themes of youthful hubris and women's role in Regency society, mocking the power dynamics of the different social classes of the time. Austen employs free direct speech to cover the main protagonist's delusional, self-centered and egotistical worldview, allowing the audience to become aware of her hypocrisy and condescension, encouraging sympathy for her actions, and allowing us to better understand and examine her moral failings. Body 1. Austen's use of indirect speech and satire reflects Emma's youthful snobbery and self-delusion. While Emma believes she is helping Harriet by taking her under her wing, she is being manipulative in trying to control her marriage prospects. This is evident in Emma's use of paralepsis, insisting that Harriet not imagine that I want to influence you, while the audience knows full well that this is exactly her intention. To dissuade Harriet from marrying Mr. Martin, Emma strategically uses ethos by positioning herself as a friend, and older than yourself, and uses aphorism in her statement that, if a woman can hesitate as to the yes to a marriage proposal, she ought to say no so directly. As a result, Emma's sincere claim that not for the world would she advise you either way is laden with dramatic irony, underscoring her egotism and privileged position. While modern readers may find unreliable and biased narrators as ordinary, in the Regency era, readers found it groundbreaking. Austen's use of free indirect speech limits the readers to Emma's perspective, but in such a way that it is not immediately apparent how delusional and condescending her views are. While Emma feels like she's being philanthropic, she is very bigoted to others not of her class, such as the yeomanry, an order of people with whom she feels she can have nothing to do, the poor, like the Bates whom she views as stupid and gossipy. She also extends this view to the nouveau riche like Mrs. Elton, a vulgar woman who lacks refinement and taste. Emma, confined to her internalized prejudices against those not from the wealthy land-owning class, fails to see her hypocrisy and moral failings in her view, hypocritically and ironically judging Mrs. Elton for her pert pretension and underbred finery, when she is the one most often guilty of being vulgar of others. This irony is again accentuated when Emma cruelly criticizes Miss Bates's talkative nature at the picnic. The audience watches Mrs. Elton doing everything that she can to assist Jane Fairfax in finding employment, a real-world solution to her marriage problem, whereas Emma just gossips and complains. Austen's deliberate use of free indirect speech is crucial to the novel's critique of class privilege. Body 2. By using the Regency-era trope of marriage, Austen crafts a satirical portrayal of the severely limited options of women of the time. Austen juxtaposes the circumstances of various single women in the marriage of Emma, Jane Fairfax, Harriet Smith and Miss Bates to underscore the differences in social standing and prospects. Emma, from the privilege of having enough money to sustain herself, is not obligated to marry, instead meddling in others' social lives. In stark contrast, Harriet was an abandoned child with limited prospects, having been described harshly by Emma as having the misfortune of her birth. With such a low social class, Harriet's only path upward is through marriage, preferably to a family that has no qualms with the circumstances of her birth. Austen uses this contrast to reiterate the importance of marriage for different classes of women of the Regency era, like the opportunities of wealthy women like Miss Churchill with those of poorer women like Jane Fairfax, who must either marry or become governesses, a role that Jane bitterly describes as the sale, not quite of human flesh, but of human intellect. Miss Bates, a background figure, serves as a cautionary tale of spinsterhood. Through these contrasts, Austen critiques the social expectations and needs of different social classes and highlights the lack of options for women of the time. Body 3. As the novel progresses, in a true Bildungsroman nature, Emma's character begins to evolve, primarily through her interactions with Mr. Knightley. His candid criticism and moral guidance act as a catalyst for self-reflection and growth. The turning point in Emma's development occurs during the Box Hill incident, where she cruelly insults Miss Bates. Mr. Knightley's rebuke, "Badly done, Emma," serves as a wake-up call, forcing her to confront her behavior and its impact on others. The use of direct dialogue here is pivotal, as it marks the moment Emma begins to truly understand her flaws. Austen's use of this moment to strip away Emma's self-delusion is both poignant and effective, illustrating the beginning of her journey toward self-improvement. By the end of the novel, Emma's transformation is evident in her newfound humility and empathy. Her reconciliation with Harriet and her acceptance of Mr. Knightley's love signify her growth from a self-centered matchmaker to a more self-aware and considerate individual. Austen's portrayal of Emma's development is a testament to the novel's exploration of personal growth and social responsibility. Through the use of free indirect discourse, irony, and direct dialogue, Austen crafts a nuanced depiction of Emma's maturation, highlighting the importance of self-awareness and the ability to change. In conclusion, the novel underscores the youthful ignorance, the significance of marriage, and the ability to change and improve on oneself. While the marriage plot and comedic misunderstandings in Emma are immensely entertaining, the novel's limited perspective and clever use of irony present these themes in a way that resonates with contemporary audiences just as it did at the time of its publication. Austen's innovative use of free indirect discourse and unreliable narration serves as a powerful and engaging means to explore these social issues.